At 14:30 on December 15, 1944, Private First Class Dirk J. Vlug crouched behind a makeshift roadblock along Highway 2 near Limon, Leyte, his eyes fixed on the distant movement of steel through jungle haze. 5 Japanese Type 95 Hago light tanks were advancing directly toward him, their engines roaring, their 37mm cannons firing intermittently down the narrow strip of dirt road. Each flash of their guns sent echoes rolling through the rainforest. Dirk Vlug was 27 years old. He had worn the uniform of the United States Army for 3 years. He had never destroyed a tank. Now 5 were coming. The Japanese had committed an armored unit of 5 Type 95 tanks, 15 crewmen in total, to break through the American roadblock guarding the only remaining supply and escape route to Ormoc Bay. That road, Highway 2, was no ordinary road. It was the lifeline of the Japanese defense in western Leyte, and Dirk Vlug was standing in its path. His unit, the 126th Infantry Regiment of the 32nd Infantry Division, had been fighting across Leyte since mid-November. The division had earned its nickname, the Red Arrow Division, in the jungles of New Guinea, where combat had been defined by suffocating humidity, relentless disease, and an enemy that struck from 10 yards away without warning. In those jungles, malaria and dysentery killed nearly as many soldiers as gunfire. But Leyte was different. Here, the Japanese were not retreating. They were making their final stand. Ormoc Valley was their last defensive stronghold. 8 days earlier, American forces from the 77th Infantry Division had landed amphibiously just 3.5 miles south of Ormoc City, cutting off escape routes and trapping Japanese forces inland. Highway 2 was now their only remaining supply corridor. If the tanks broke through, Japanese reinforcements could flow north. Supplies could move. The battle would continue. If the roadblock held, the valley would become a trap. The weapon available to stop them was the American M9 bazooka. Introduced in 1944, it was a 2.36-inch rocket launcher weighing just 15 pounds, designed to be portable enough for infantry to carry into battle. It fired M6A3 rockets equipped with shaped charge warheads capable of penetrating up to 4 inches of armor at 100 yards, more than enough to defeat Japanese tanks, whose armor was thin by comparison. The Type 95 Hago was fast and maneuverable, but lightly protected. Its frontal armor measured only 14 millimeters thick, barely over half an inch. Its sides were thinner still, yet its weapons were deadly. Each tank carried a 37mm main gun and 2 7.7mm machine guns. Inside each hull, 3 crewmen worked in tight coordination: the commander, who also served as gunner, the driver, and the hull machine gunner. 5 tanks meant 15 trained enemy soldiers, 5 cannons, 10 machine guns, 17 weapons aimed at anyone who tried to stop them. For over a week, Vlug's division had fought yard by yard down Ormoc Road. Since December 7th, the 126th and 127th Infantry Regiments had advanced less than a mile through dense jungle terrain. Progress was measured in yards. Casualties mounted daily. Rifle companies that had entered combat with full strength were reduced to fewer than 90 men. Officers had been killed. Sergeants assumed command. And now, armored vehicles were advancing straight toward the roadblock. The lead tank closed to 400 yards. That was when Dirk Vlug made his decision. He reached for the bazooka leaning against the sandbags. His hands moved with practiced efficiency. He assembled the launcher, locking its 2 sections together. He checked the magneto firing system. It was operational. Then he grabbed the canvas ammunition bag. Inside were 6 M6A3 rockets. 6 chances. No assistant. No supporting fire. No cover. Just 1 infantryman armed with a bazooka and a Colt M1911 pistol, standing alone against 5 armored vehicles. The road curved slightly ahead, bordered by thick jungle vegetation. The tank commanders had not yet seen him. Their turrets rotated slowly left and right, searching for targets. Vlug stepped out from behind the roadblock and began walking toward them. At 350 yards, the lead tank commander spotted movement. The turret rotated sharply. The 37mm cannon aligned directly on him. Machine guns opened fire. Tracer rounds sliced through the air past his head. Dirt erupted around his boots as bullets struck the ground. Still, he kept walking. Loading a bazooka was designed to be a 2-man operation. The loader removed the rocket, inspected it, inserted it into the rear of the tube, connected the ignition wire, and signaled readiness. Alone, Vlug had to do everything himself. He could not load while standing and maintain control of the heavy launcher. Standard procedure required kneeling. Kneeling meant stopping. Stopping meant exposure. He continued forward until he reached 200 yards. Then he dropped to one knee. He rested the launcher across his thigh and pulled a rocket from the bag. He inserted it into the tube and connected the ignition wire. The weapon was ready. Machine gun fire intensified. The hull gunner of the lead tank fired sustained bursts. Bullets snapped through the air inches above Vlug's head, but the tank's machine gun could not depress low enough to hit his kneeling position. He raised the launcher to his shoulder. Through the General Electric T-43 sight, the tank filled his view. He adjusted the range dial. 200 yards. Centered the reticle. And fired. The magneto triggered the ignition. The rocket streaked forward at 265 feet per second. It struck the tank squarely on the front armor. The shaped charge detonated instantly. A focused jet of molten metal penetrated the steel plate, spraying fragments through the interior. Temperatures inside surged to thousands of degrees. Ammunition ignited. The turret lifted from the blast, then fell back at an angle. Black smoke poured from the wreck. All 3 crewmen were dead. 4 tanks remained. 5 rockets left. The second tank reacted immediately. Its crew opened their hatches and climbed out, abandoning the vehicle. Japanese tank doctrine demanded it. Crews were trained to fight on foot if their vehicle was disabled. 3 soldiers emerged, rifles in hand, advancing toward Vlug. He was still kneeling. His bazooka was empty. Reloading would take too long. They were closing fast. He dropped the launcher and reached for his sidearm. The Colt M1911 came free from its holster. He disengaged the safety, raised the pistol. The enemy soldiers were 50 yards away. He fired once. The lead attacker collapsed instantly. The remaining 2 soldiers froze. They stared at their fallen comrade, then at the American soldier kneeling in the road. They made their decision and turned back toward their tank. 4 tanks remained, and Dirk Vlug was still standing. Dirk Vlug lowered the smoking Colt pistol and slid it back into its holster. There was no time to watch the 2 Japanese soldiers retreat. No time to think about what had just happened. He reached immediately for another rocket. His hands moved quickly, efficiently, driven by instinct and training. He lifted the olive drab M6A3 rocket from the canvas bag, inserted it into the open rear of the bazooka, connected the ignition wire. Ahead of him, the surviving crewmen of the second Type 95 scrambled desperately to re-enter their tank. The hull gunner disappeared through the forward hatch. The driver followed, dropping into his seat. They were trying to seal the vehicle, to button up, regain protection, and resume firing. Vlug did not give them the chance. He raised the bazooka to his shoulder. The tank sat motionless. Range, 180 yards. The driver's hatch was still open. He adjusted his aim point slightly upward and fired. The rocket struck perfectly. It entered through the open hatch before detonating inside the crew compartment. In the enclosed space, the shaped charge's focused jet of molten metal tore through everything inside. Both crewmen were killed instantly. The tank's ammunition ignited seconds later. The explosion ripped the turret free from the hull. It flew into the air and landed 12 feet away. 2 tanks destroyed. 4 rockets remaining. 3 tanks still advancing. The 3rd tank commander had seen everything. He had watched 2 armored vehicles die in less than 90 seconds. He understood the threat. His turret rotated deliberately. The cannon elevated. This time, he would not rely on machine guns. He selected high explosive. The 37mm high explosive shell weighed over 1.5 pounds. Fired at nearly 2,000 feet per second, it could kill exposed infantry within a 20-yard radius. The tank carried more than 100 rounds. He needed only 1. Vlug was already reloading. The 3rd rocket slid into place. Ignition wire connected. His hands remained steady. They should have been trembling. He had already destroyed 2 tanks and killed multiple enemy soldiers in under 2 minutes. Adrenaline should have slowed him. Instead, it sharpened him. He raised the launcher. Through the sight, the tank filled his vision. Range, 250 yards. The enemy gun lowered toward him. 3 seconds. 2. He fired first. The rocket struck the turret face. The shaped charge penetrated cleanly. Inside, the explosion tore through the crew compartment. The commander and gunner died instantly. The driver attempted to reverse, but the engine seized moments later as flames spread through the vehicle. The third tank was finished. 3 tanks destroyed. 3 rockets left. 2 enemy vehicles remained. But now the surviving tank commanders changed tactics. The 4th tank veered left into dense jungle vegetation. The 5th moved right. They were attempting to flank him, divide his attention, force him to choose, kill him from the other side. Vlug stood alone in the center of Highway 2. No cover, no protection, only open road. He chose the left tank. He began walking toward it. The 4th Type 95 crashed through thick jungle growth, its suspension struggling over uneven ground. Branches snapped beneath its tracks. The vehicle rocked violently as it moved, its manually operated turret trying to align on him. The hull machine gun opened fire. Bullets cut through leaves and branches. But the tank was moving, and Vlug was moving. The gunner could not aim accurately. At 25 yards, Vlug stopped. He dropped to one knee and loaded another rocket. The tank began turning toward him. The turret rotated slowly. He could see it. He knew how much time remained. 3 seconds. He dropped prone and rested the launcher across a fallen log. He aimed at the tank's side armor. 6 millimeters thick. Point blank. He fired. The rocket struck below the turret ring. The shaped charge penetrated instantly. Inside, ammunition detonated in a catastrophic chain reaction. The hull ruptured. The turret blasted skyward, thrown 15 feet into the air. The 4th tank was destroyed. 2 rockets remained. 1 tank still lived. The 5th Type 95 had moved deep into the vegetation on the opposite side of the road. Its commander had seen enough. He shut down the engine. The tank went silent. It disappeared into the jungle. Vlug stood motionless, scanning the vegetation. No sound, no movement. The tank was hiding, waiting. He began walking along the road's edge, searching for any sign. Broken branches, disturbed leaves, exhaust residue. Nothing. 50 yards, 100 yards. Still nothing. The jungle stood 8 feet tall around him. Visibility was limited. The tank could be anywhere. If it found him first, he would not survive. Then he saw it. A mistake. 30 yards into the jungle, a machine gun barrel protruded slightly above the vegetation. Unmistakable. He stepped off the road and moved silently through the undergrowth. The crew remained unaware. He stopped 20 yards behind the vehicle. Now he could see it fully, partially concealed behind a tree, nearly invisible. He loaded his 5th rocket, aimed at the rear armor, the engine compartment, the weakest point. At 14:38, for minutes and 20 seconds after stepping onto the road, he fired. The rocket struck the rear hull. The shaped charge penetrated. Fuel ignited instantly. Flames spread rapidly. The driver attempted to escape, opening the hatch, but smoke overcame him before he could climb free. The commander and gunner never escaped. The 5th tank burned where it stood. The battle was over. Vlug stood in the jungle, breathing heavily. 1 rocket remained unused. He turned and walked back toward Highway 2. 5 Japanese tanks lay destroyed along the road. Columns of black smoke rose into the afternoon sky, and American soldiers began emerging from cover, staring at the man who had done it alone. They had seen everything. From their positions behind the sandbags and fallen timber of the roadblock, American soldiers had watched the entire engagement unfold. They had seen Private First Class Dirk Vlug step out onto Highway 2 alone. They had watched him advance toward 5 Japanese tanks without hesitation. They had counted each rocket. They had watched each explosion tear apart armored steel. And they had waited for him to die. But he didn't. Sergeant Leroy Johnson was the first to reach him. Johnson had been stationed nearly 400 yards north, manning another defensive sector along the same roadblock. When the firing began, he had heard the explosions echo through the jungle. He had seen columns of black smoke rising above the trees. He had run down Highway 2 expecting to find the worst, Vlug dead, the roadblock destroyed, and Japanese armor advancing into American lines. Instead, he found Dirk Vlug standing calmly in the road. The bazooka rested across his shoulder. Behind him, 5 Japanese tanks burned in scattered wreckage. 1 unused rocket remained in his canvas bag. Other American soldiers began emerging cautiously from their defensive positions, disbelief written across their faces. They approached the destroyed tanks, inspecting the wreckage, confirming what their eyes could barely accept. All 15 Japanese crewmen were dead. 3 had been killed attempting to attack on foot after abandoning their vehicle. 12 more had died inside their tanks when shaped charge warheads penetrated their armor and ignited ammunition and fuel. Not a single enemy soldier survived. American casualties at the roadblock, 0. One soldier carried a Kodak 35 field camera. He raised it and photographed Vlug standing beside the destroyed armor. The images captured blackened steel, twisted turrets, and the lone American infantryman responsible for it all. Those photographs would later appear in the pages of Stars and Stripes, the official newspaper of the United States Army. Evidence. Proof. Private Victor Meinberg of the 129th Field Artillery Battalion had witnessed the engagement as well. Assigned to a forward observer team, he had moved ammunition under fire to bazooka operators during the fighting. For his actions, Meinberg would later receive the Bronze Star. But Vlug had needed no ammunition runner. He had done it alone. The tactical situation changed instantly. The Japanese tanks had been sent to break through the roadblock, reopen Highway 2, and preserve the supply line to Ormoc Bay. They had been intended to reinforce the defense of the valley and allow trapped Japanese forces to escape. Instead, they became obstacles. Burning wreckage blocked the road. Japanese reinforcements could no longer move. American forces could advance. That same afternoon, the 126th Infantry Regiment pushed forward, encountering weaker resistance than expected. Without armored support, Japanese defensive positions became vulnerable. Word spread rapidly through the ranks of the 32nd Division. At first, many officers refused to believe it. One private destroying 5 tanks alone sounded impossible. Verification was ordered. Officers were dispatched to inspect the battlefield. They counted the destroyed vehicles. They interviewed witnesses. They examined Vlug's bazooka. 5 rockets had been fired. 1 remained. The evidence was undeniable. But destroying tanks alone was not enough for the Medal of Honor. The action had to accomplish a decisive military objective. It had. The destroyed tanks preserved the roadblock. They enabled continued American advance. They prevented Japanese armored units from interfering with operations across Ormoc Valley. Lieutenant Colonel Ferdinand Zara, commanding the battalion, began preparing the official after-action report that very afternoon. Witness statements were collected. Photographs were preserved. A formal recommendation was submitted for the nation's highest military decoration. But the battle for Leyte continued. 3 days later, on December 18, 1944, the 77th Infantry Division captured Valencia Airfield, 7 miles north of Ormoc. American forces advancing from opposite directions linked up, sealing the valley. The Japanese 35th Army was cut off. The valley was secured. Still, fighting remained brutal. Dense jungle terrain reduced visibility to 20 yards or less. Japanese defenders constructed fortified positions using heavy logs and interconnected trench systems. Every position had to be cleared manually. Flamethrowers, grenades, bayonets. The 126th Infantry Regiment fought continuously for 10 days without rest. Companies that began with 160 men were reduced to fewer than 80. Officers fell. Sergeants assumed command. Corporals led squads. But the roadblock held. The Japanese never again attempted an armored breakthrough on Highway 2. They never reclaimed the ground where Vlug had stopped them. American forces tightened their control over Ormoc Valley. Japanese units trapped south of the roadblock could neither retreat nor resupply. The strategic consequences were decisive. On December 21st, American forces completed their link-up near Valencia. The corridor from Breakneck Ridge in the north to Ormoc Bay in the south was now fully under Allied control. The Japanese 35th Army was divided. Its defeat became inevitable. General Tomoyuki Yamashita had committed major forces to defend Leyte, reinforcing the island with troops from across the Philippines. He had ordered them to hold Ormoc Valley at all costs. But American control of Highway 2 made that impossible. By December 25th, organized Japanese resistance collapsed. Surviving forces fled into the mountains. Many never escaped. Japanese losses on Leyte reached approximately 49,000 killed, many dying from starvation and disease after being cut off from supplies. American losses were also severe. 3,596 killed, 12,000 wounded. The 32nd Division alone suffered nearly 3,000 casualties. But the island was secured. On December 26, 1944, General Douglas MacArthur declared Leyte liberated. American engineers began constructing airfields. Supply routes were secured. Ports became operational. Leyte became a staging ground for the invasion of Luzon. Through it all, Dirk Vlug remained with his unit. No special privileges. No reassignment. He continued standing guard. Continued patrolling. Continued fighting. The Medal of Honor recommendation moved slowly through military channels. But among the men of the 32nd Division, his actions were already known. He had walked alone toward 5 tanks. He had stopped them, and he had held the road. Dirk Vlug was supposed to invade Japan. By the summer of 1945, American military planners were preparing what would have been the largest amphibious assault in human history. Millions of Allied soldiers were being assembled for Operation Downfall, the invasion of the Japanese home islands. Casualty projections were grim. Military planners estimated that hundreds of thousands, perhaps more than 1 million American soldiers, would be killed or wounded before Japan surrendered. Private First Class Dirk J. Vlug was scheduled to be among them. But in June 1945, his orders changed. A telegram arrived at division headquarters on Mindanao. It did not assign him to another combat zone. It did not transfer him to another unit. It sent him home. The recommendation for the Medal of Honor had been moving steadily through military channels for 6 months. Each level of command reviewed the evidence carefully. His battalion commanders submitted witness statements and after-action reports. Regimental commanders confirmed the facts. Division headquarters forwarded the recommendation to 6th Army Command. From there, it went to General Douglas MacArthur's headquarters in Manila, then to Washington. At the War Department, officials reviewed approximately 400 Medal of Honor recommendations submitted from the Pacific Theater during World War II. Only 81 were approved. The criteria were absolute. The action had to demonstrate conspicuous gallantry beyond the call of duty. It had to involve clear risk of death, and it had to accomplish a decisive military objective. Dirk Vlug's actions met every requirement. On June 14, 1945, he was honorably discharged at Fort Sheridan, Illinois. His military record listed 3 years and 2 months of active service. Combat operations in New Guinea. Leyte, Mindanao, Medal of Honor pending. 2 months later, on August 15, 1945, Japan surrendered. Victory over Japan Day. The invasion he had expected to fight and never happened. Atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki forced Japan's capitulation, ending the war without the catastrophic casualties that had been predicted. Dirk Vlug returned home to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Before the war, he had been an ordinary citizen in a city of 176,000 people, a center of furniture manufacturing and American industry. He had enlisted in April 1941, months before Pearl Harbor. He had left as a young man of 24. He returned at 28, a combat veteran, a survivor. Soon, a Medal of Honor recipient. Grand Rapids had never produced one before. The city prepared a celebration. Citizens raised donations. Enough money was collected to build and furnish a house for him, a permanent expression of their gratitude. On June 7, 1946, Dirk Vlug stood inside the White House. President Harry S. Truman personally presented the Medal of Honor. The citation was read aloud. It described one soldier advancing alone under direct enemy fire. It described the destruction of 5 enemy tanks. It described courage beyond expectation. Then President Truman placed the medal around his neck. A light blue ribbon. A bronze star surrounded by a wreath. The highest military decoration the United States could award. Dirk Vlug became one of 464 Medal of Honor recipients from World War II, one of only 81 from the Pacific Theater. He returned home to Grand Rapids, where thousands of citizens lined the streets to welcome him. He rode through the city in an open car. Crowds applauded. Flags waved. The celebration lasted 3 days. Then, gradually, it ended. That was exactly what he wanted. He did not seek fame. He sought normal life. He accepted a job with the United States Postal Service. He became a mail carrier, walking quiet residential streets, delivering letters and packages. No incoming fire. No armored vehicles. No explosions. Just routine. In May 1949, he joined the Michigan Army National Guard. He was promoted to Master Sergeant. He trained younger soldiers. He taught them how to use rocket launchers properly. He never told them that he had once destroyed 5 tanks himself. He simply showed them how. Load the weapon correctly. Acquire the sight picture. Fire. He retired from military service in January 1951. In total, he had served his country for nearly a decade. Then he returned to delivering mail. For 40 years, he walked the same streets of Grand Rapids. He spoke with neighbors, delivered packages, lived quietly, married, raised a family, attended church. He never spoke publicly about the war. The bazooka he used on Highway 2 was never recovered. It disappeared into the jungles of the Philippines, lost to rust, time, and the aftermath of war. But the photographs survived. Black and white images captured on December 15, 1944. Dirk Vlug standing beside the destroyed tanks. Those photographs remain preserved in the National Archives. Historians study them. Military experts analyze them. They examine penetration patterns, blast damage, tactical positioning. They try to understand how one infantryman destroyed 5 armored vehicles alone. But the explanation requires no technical analysis. He saw what needed to be done, and he did it. On June 25, 1996, Dirk J. Vlug died in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was 79 years old. More than 51 years had passed since the afternoon he stood alone on Highway 2. He was buried with full military honors. His Medal of Honor was displayed at his funeral. His obituary was brief. It mentioned his service. It mentioned his career. It mentioned his family. But it could never fully describe what he had done. Highway 2 still exists. The jungle has grown back. No monument marks the exact spot where he stood. But the records remain. The citation, the photographs, the witness statements. Proof that on one afternoon in December 1944, one American soldier stepped onto a road and stopped an armored assault alone. He never asked to be remembered, but history remembers him anyway.